Hello and welcome to
Absolute Game of
Nerd. We are your non-geek, non-nerd hosts, Salt and Pepper, JP and Rohan, and with us today we have a three-time guest. There's only a few people in this world that can been on the show more than two times, and we have Laurence here with us tonight. So, Rohan, why is this gentleman with us again tonight?
So we got a cool topic to discuss tonight. And, Laurence, again, he's a three-time now third appearance on the show. He's kind of someone I've kind of mimicked my collecting kind of journey after, you could say. But he's kind of someone that has really kind of climbed the mountain of collecting goals. And so I wanted to kind of talk today about kind of enjoying the hobby for the long term, especially in Lawrence's case, right? He kind of went down that Silver Age Grail run route, and he kind of upgraded the Golden Age, got his Batman 1, got a Tech 31. He's climbed that mountain. What's next? How does he enjoy the hobby? We're going to talk about all of that today. But Laurence, thanks for joining us, as always. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. Again, I'm happy to be a three-time guest on your channel, but I want to be like Ric Flair, 16. I want to get to 16 times on your channel. I want to be the champ.
There we go. Dan says you're the grail of the hobby. So there we go. 16. We got 13 more. We can get there.
That's my boy.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, we can kind of jump right into this. So kind of where I want to start is, when I first started collecting, which, around the same time as JP, and then I found your channel fairly close to the beginning of collecting. When I looked at your collection, it's kind of what I'm going for right now. It was that kind of like major Silver Age Grail, right? AF-15, Jim 83, X-Men 1, these types of books. Talk to us about like when you started kind of doing that kind of thing. What was your mindset then? And then I want to talk about where it went from there.
So when I first got back into the hobby, it was probably around 2017 or so, and it's in the midst of the MCU, but things hadn't really exploded yet. But I was getting good deals on books. And I will say, when you're first starting to do this, like your first foray into jumping into a big book, it's really hard. Okay. Because you never spent that kind of money on a comic book before. So you're like, wow, I'm really nervous about this. Not only if I'm buying the right book, if I'm buying from the right person, the right grade, the right copy of the book. So there's a lot of ifs and buts. And once you get the first one, it's all kind of downhill from there because you get a lot more comfortable with buying certain things. So it's just like the biggest purchase I made first, believe it or not, was just a Hulk 181, like Bronze Age Key. Like that was my big first book ever since like I got rid of most of my collection in the early 2000s.
Yeah, because you owned AF-15 twice before, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I've owned the big books before, but I was a lot younger. I had, didn't have any responsibility, young kid, fresh out of college, making decent money. So, but when I got back into this, I had a family, so I had to be careful on what I'm buying, but also like I wanted to enjoy myself. So there was always nerves jumping into it, but I never thought like, I'm going to go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to stop. I want to own all the books that I want to own. But here's the thing that I don't think a lot of people know. When I was buying a lot of these books, this was the market. Like it was constantly up. So it was a lot easier to not worry about, you know what? I don't have to worry about if the book's going to go down. I don't have to worry about if, the MCU is going to do a character wrong and destroy the book. Like everything they did was just absolute fire and just causing people to buy books hand over fist. And I got in maybe like a year and a half before it really started to take off. So, and like I said, Hulk 181 was my first book. I think the next one after that was an FF1, which I no longer have. And I got rid of that book, when when Disney bought Fox, because I thought, and maybe now's the time to let go, because everything was just going crazy. But the first piece of the puzzle is being comfortable purchasing a book. So we can start there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a huge thing, because this is something we've talked about this a lot on this show. I guess I've brought it up specifically, and I think you and I have even talked about it just like on IG message, in the sense that like people always say things like, I can never get this book, I can never get that book, or I can't afford that book. And it's like, now obviously there are some extreme cases, and some people do not, may not be as fortunate. I totally understand that. But like a lot of these people that say these things, like will spend $100 a week, $200 a week on 10 books in a claim sale and things like that. And it's just like, it's more of just a priorities type of function. And then there is a function of, it's way easier for someone, I think, to spend $2,000 on, let's say, 20 $100 books than it is to buy one $2,000 book. And I totally get that. Like I've gotten over that kind of hump. And so to me, I'm like, oh, you know, it's the same. It's just 1 versus 10, but it's a huge leap, I think, for a lot of people in this hobby to take.
I think that's the big issue, is that, you know, you don't realize when you buy $100 book one day and then the next month you buy another $100 book, and then you're not realizing that if you add all those books up, that it amounts to the money that you could have spent on a bigger key. So for me, I never bought like new books ever since like the early 90s. Like that's when I stopped buying new books. So, you know, not having that in my repertoire as I was getting back into the hobby made it easier. I was still buying back issues. Don't get me wrong. I would buy small first appearances, but I was also getting them for ridiculous prices back in 2017, 2018. So it made it a little bit more palatable. Also during that time frame, I was also buying those books knowing that I was buying them at a good price. And in a couple of months, I probably could have made a couple of $100 on each one, $50 minimum. So I was doing that as well, funding the hobby. People talk about funding the hobby. It's really hard to do now in this type of market. And too many people are doing that in this type of market, where they're buying books and then having to let go of them at losses, or they're not holding on to them for a long enough time period where they're not making any money. But that shouldn't be the goal regardless. But yeah, I mean, I just always had that itch to own important characters. That was the whole thing with me. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And I just want to add too, like, I was someone that, like, you know, I would get spread a little too thin, and then like, it'd be like, oh, you know, it's a $15 book there and a 30. Oh, it's, you know what? It's not big enough expenditures to like kind of get me off my goal kind of mindset. And it's like, when you look back, you're like, wow, that really added up. It does add up quite fast. Yep. When you do kind of look back on it. So it is definitely something to think about. And again, it's totally understandable. If you can't get over that hump of like X amount of dollars for one book, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I totally understand it. But yeah, okay. So then take us from there. So then the ball started rolling, right? And again, like when I kind of started up and started watching you, you kind of had that Silver Age, the whole crew. So kind of like,
I was going to say, I want to bring up something, because I remember me and you talking about when you got this one specific book, and I heard you talk about it recently on one of the shows you guys were on, your FF12, when you bought the Pence variant. And I remember me and you having a conversation about that book. I said, you know what? I don't really like owning Pence variants because, one, they don't appreciate as fast as, you know, American books, but also, I don't know, I like collecting the stuff that I grew up with, and I grew up with that book. So not that the book was in the 60s, you know, I'm collecting in the 80s, but I was always fascinated with that cover with Jack Kirby as well. So I urge you to just try to find whatever, but you were pretty cool with that. And then now to hear you talk about that book, like a few weeks back, like you said, you know what, you agreed with me now, saying, yeah. But I also think the reason I bring that up is because that's the whole part of the process. Because I remember buying an Amazing Spider-Man #3 Pence variant years and years ago, and I felt exactly the way you did when you bought it. And then later on, I said, you know what? I want to own the American version because that's what I grew up with seeing. That's what I grew up recognizing. So it was important to me to do so. But back to your question, in that once you get started with a big book, you're already automatically looking for your next one. That's like your mindset. All right, I did a good job on this book. I'm happy with this. I've set it on the mantle. What's next? And that's the thing with this hobby. It is always what's next. Even me now, where I am, and I could sit here and say I probably owned almost every book that I'd ever wanted to own. What's next? And I'm sure we'll get into that later on, but my mindset was always, I got the first one. What else do I want to own? Is it fiscally possible for me to own that book? If it was, then I would go ahead and look for the right copy for myself. And I've said this numerous times to both of you guys. I don't need to have the highest grade copy of a book. I say it all the time on my channel that I'm okay owning a low grade book if it's, you know, presentation is right and I'm comfortable with it. I'm almost happier to own a lower grade copy because, one, it's easier to sell a lower grade copy of a book that's desirable than a higher grade copy where you have less buyers of the same book. And I still feel that way now, even with golden age books, restored books, stuff like that. And I'm sure we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, I was talking to
one thing I wanted to. I should say one thing I was gonna bring up. I got my Amish internet kind of screwed me up there, and I missed some of the what was going on there. But I got the gist of what you guys were talking about with Rohan, with was talking about being disciplined, right? Did you guys go over that part of it? And then you're talking about lower grade. But my question is, if you're eventually going to upgrade the book, why not just wait longer to get the higher grade?
So here's the thing. That's a great question. I only upgraded one book in my collection ever. I always said to myself, I'm okay with the copy I have. I don't need to go out and get a better grade copy. In fact, I've actually downgraded a few books because I wanted the money back in my pocket. So I remember I had a 1.8 Hulk 1, and I downgraded to a 1.5. I had an AF-15 3.0, which I now have a 2.5. So I've definitely downgraded books to save money, especially when I bought a book for a certain price. It had gone up in value. I took my income off that book and I bought another copy, even though it was lower grade, because I was happy just to own the book. And that's, I think, the big point that a lot of people miss is that, especially for me, like, these are things that I want to own. I don't just go out and buy books just to buy books. Like, I've always wanted to own an AF-15. I've always wanted to own a GM83, a Tales of Spence 39. Like, these are the characters I grew up with, whether I was a huge fan or not. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd have a Batman 1 or a Tech 31. Like, never. But when opportunity presented itself, I was able to take some of the books that I did have and ship them off for a book, a bigger book.
Yeah, and I do want to get to that, but first I want to kind of talk a little bit more about what JP asked. I think there's a couple things, right? One, there is a component where, like, you may think, like, I need this FF5 in 6.0 or higher, right? But then let's just say you start out lower and you get like I got a 1.5. You'd be shocked, I think, sometimes when you get that 1.5, how when you look at it, if it presents well. Now, if you get one that looks like a dog, that's a different story. Yeah. But it presents well, I think you'd be shocked about how many people would be like, you know what? I'm actually perfectly happy with this. And I'd actually rather focus now on the next one versus on upgrading this. And then even more importantly, I think if you kind of keep waiting around, like, oh, if I just wait a little longer, I can get a higher grade one. Oh, I just wait a little bit longer, I get even higher grade one. I do think there's a component of, like, if you do want to hit these targets, you do have to pull the trigger, right? Because you, like Laurence said, once you get that first big book, you got to get over that hump. You start to build some momentum, right? If you keep waiting and waiting and waiting, you'll kind of never really get there almost. And not to mention, like, there's fun, even if you start low grade, like, there's fun to, like, talk about owning it and sharing it and things like that. Like, there's fun involved, but I do think it's very important. I shouldn't say very important. These are comic books, right? But, like, if this is something that you want to do, if you maintain this mindset, if I just wait a little longer, I can get a better one. Like, I find that people end up just not doing it. And in my opinion, for those, I usually find that they're actually subconsciously just not ready to jump in into something big like that is really what the issue is.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to you said having fun owning them. I mean, people collect how they want, so fun can be, buying a new book every week, like some of the guests we've had.
I guess my point is like if you keep waiting, you're not going to get the fun of ever owning it because you're going to just keep waiting, right?
Yeah, but versus, I don't understand that. My point is that I look at this way as a hobby. Like, I've been disciplined most of my life with things I do for work wise, but, like, when it comes to a hobby, I mean, I guess if I wanted something, I pretty much could go get it if I wanted it. Most things I would say, but would it make sense to me to with way the market's going now? Like, that's the part that you mentioned earlier, Laurence, is that when you were buying, it was going up. So when you bought it, it didn't matter. Now with shit going down, like, if you bought it today and you didn't wait, like, freaking, there's a Hulk 181 we saw, a 5.5 that's less than I paid for my 4.0. And it's just like, I'm not going to sell mine, but I can't sell mine to upgrade because I lose my ass on the one I sell. So you can upgrade or downgrade because you made money on the one you bought before because that price went up. But in the down market, you're getting squeezed.
Yeah, I should caveat, JB. I didn't mean to say like you can't have fun elsewhere. Like I just meant fun for that specific book, right? You could certainly do a million other things in collecting to have fun. I was just talking about like the fun of owning the first Doctor Doom. Let's just say like that was.
I was going to say, for me, like the important factor, and I think a lot of people miss this, is the reason I buy books is because I have an attachment to the character. If you don't have an attachment to the character, you shouldn't probably be buying that book because you're going to end up regretting it. So JP, if you're a big Wolverine fan, which I know you are, I'm happy you own the book, and that's all that matters. Forget the price, forget the grade. I have owned a 1.0 or 1.5 AF-15. It wasn't the greatest looking copy, but I was happy just to own an AF-15. I don't care what the book is. If you have an attachment to the character, I know I use this book a lot in my videos, but like even Omega Men 3, if you're a big Lobo fan and that's what you grew up with watching, just own the goddamn book. Don't worry about the price. Don't worry about anything. I know I do a lot of price videos, but it's just to say, you know what? Yes, go ahead and buy a lower grade. The grade doesn't matter if you want to own the book. I don't want you to overspend, but
the grade doesn't matter if you're buying. You don't need a 9.8 and an Omega Men 3, right? You just want to have one, or any McFarlane book that I like. But when it comes to your bigger keys, you obviously there's a price point there, but it isn't like just going to buy new clothes. You just don't go buy it like you don't go just buy an AF-15. Go, I just want one, so I get it. Like that's what millionaires do. Like I just want that painting, and that's when you see those sales that skew the normal. It's because someone just said, "Fuck it, I want it," and they bought it because they didn't care enough because that price point didn't matter to them because they just wanted it.
Yeah,
I totally get it. With the smaller books, you don't have to worry so much. But the big stuff, but I'll use an example. Like I bought this is years ago. I bought a Journey into Mystery 83 Raw. I thought it was like a 1.8, maybe a 2.0. It came back a 1.0 from CGC, but I was still happy with the book. It presented really well. I think I paid like $2,200 for it, which is whatever. But you know what? I just wanted to own the book. So as long as it looked nice and it wasn't restored, because that was my bigger issue and it's complete, I was okay with it.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was going to go to next. Like we all have different personalities here, right? And there's a lot of people where like seeing their book drop, it really kind of affects them, and it takes away from the enjoyment of having the book. If that is the case for, you, JP, which, based on our conversation, I think it definitely more so than it is for me. Like, I just wouldn't do it is really what I'd come down to. Like, I think like Laurence is saying, like, if you're going to do this, like you've got to be okay that understanding the comic book hobby is volatile. Your book is going to go down. It could go up, but you need to enjoy that book away from that, regardless of what it is, and just enjoy the fact that you have that book. And if you're not able to separate the two, I would just say, like, don't buy that book. Because again, that's the last thing you want to do is have something that you have that's just going to drive you crazy.
Well, I'll even add to that. If it's driving you nuts, sell the goddamn thing and get it out of your sight. Yeah. And then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Okay. I bought the GSX 1, 4.5. I had my 3, grails that I wanted, 181, 129, and GSX 1. All of them have dropped like a fucking rock. And, but my ASM 129 is beautiful for a 5.0. Like it's pressed nice. It looks great. My 181's a nice, it's white pages. Well, not that matters anymore, but it's a nice looking book. The GSX 1, I never really cared as much for it, but I obviously love Wolverine. So I wanted that book for those reasons, but I took it. It's dropped $500 in value. I took it to a con, and I was trying to work a deal where I was going to buy some Star Wars toys, like Boba Fett, still in the not graded, but still in the box, carded Boba Fett, and I couldn't work the deal out. So I went to another gentleman, and I didn't really have anything I wanted, but I wanted to trade up that book to get some other things. Right? It might have been an ASM 5. Is that the one with Doom in it? ASM.
Yep, ASM 5.
Yes, ASM 5. That one and something else. And the guy took the book, and even the guys looking at it that I was gonna trade for the GI or the Star Wars, they're looking at it. It's graded. It's a 4.5. They're looking at it, checking the grader's notes. Oh, it's got a spine split over here. They're like, examine this fucking thing. It's a 4.5. It is what it is, right? They all look different. It presented well, but it had a tear on the one side, I guess, of the binding. Took it to the other guy who was going to trade the for the Spider-Man 5. He told me my book was a turd. He goes, this is just a mid-grade GSX1. There's 100,000 of them out there. It's just a turd of a book. You wanted to buy it, so you bought it on a low grade, and now you want me to take it for what I have on my shelf, and I'd rather keep what I have on my shelf than buy that. I'm like, well, then fucking keep what you have. You know, I showed you what I had to sell, and you are trading. You're like, oh, I might want this, but it's a turd. You called it a turd.
I mean, I think you unfortunately dealt with some dickheads,
Yeah,
right?
that sounds like an asshole.
Yeah, and it's like honestly, like those dealers that talk to you like that, it's unfortunate. Like, I don't know, it seems like that's kind of a negotiating tactic for some of the old guard in this hobby, that they think that like that's the best way that they can get the price that they want. It's like, that's not how you make deals, at least not in 2024 or 2025.
No.
Excuse me. Like, that's just not how.
Again, it comes down to somebody who it isn't as liquid as you would think with some of these bigger keys or these ones that are pretty volatile, because they're only going to move if the price is right. And everyone's looking, like you said on our chat, everyone's lowballing 20% on the low price. And then you got these dealers who have to make money, and I get it. And they're beating up the what you have just to get it at a lower price. And then, so that makes you more angry with what you have. Right.
And again, this just goes back to like, if you're going to do it, like make sure that you love it, right? Again, yes, we, the consumer, are also part of the reason why comic books are still dropping. Because like we said in the chat, like we see a book and it's posted for $1,000. Oh, I want that book. But instead of saying claim, I'm going to go offer $850, right? Or offer $800, right? And I'm all for it. I will do the same thing. And the thing is, and that's why I'm all for the books as of right now. Keep going down. Like, it'll just make them cheaper for me, because I'm happy to have them and I want them. And I don't worry about the long-term effect of, and now again, like this is all comes back to also being financially responsible with everything else you got going on in your life, right? If you're not doing that, then we've got a whole slew of other problems that is not what we're talking about here.
Just so you know, I have lost money on comics. I have not just made money on every comic that I've bought. I've lost money. Like the FF1 that I bought, you know, it wasn't the greatest looking copy. It had a hole in the first 3 pages from the cover, and the first 2 pages, a little hole. And unfortunately, it deterred a lot of buyers. But what did it do? It taught me something, what to look for now if I'm going to buy a big book. So like, that's where a lot of people who kind of haven't grown up in the hobby, and when I say grown up, I mean have been in it for a long time, where they've made mistakes, realize the mistakes they've made so they don't mistake them again. That's what I'm really talking about. And that's what's really important, because everybody's going to make mistakes. You're never going to go through the whole thing perfect, but just realize that it's not the end of the world. Money is only money. And that's a ridiculous statement. I understand that money's only money, but if you sell your whole 181 right now and you took that money and you put it in the bank for, I don't even say bank, let's just call it like a 5% CD for the year, you know, you're going to get some money back, whatever it is. My point is that you can always recoup that money in a certain way. And that's how my mind works. And so if I'm going to take a loss on something, I'm going to try to remake that money doing something else.
Yeah. Right. And again, we've talked about this before too, is like, if you are wheeling and dealing and you operate with a mindset of, I can never lose on a book, you're not going to enjoy the hobby, right? You've got to be, and again, that if you're not going to be comfortable losing, you know, at least in the interim, like, again, my advice would be like, don't buy that book if it's going to bother you that much. Again, you need to buy it because you love what you're buying, and you're going to be okay. Because again, we have no idea what these things are going to do. So you have to be okay with that uncertainty.
Yeah, but why are you buying it? Not you, Rohan, but why are we buying it for this, for the fact that we believe it's going to go up in value? If you're buying it to enjoy, like I'm not buying a boat because I think it's going to go up in value. I'm buying it because I want to get on the water. You know what I mean?
So that's my whole point. You should be buying the book because you enjoy seeing it in your home. You're owning a piece of history.
I want that AF-15. 30,000, no problem. Here, that's what I want to put on my shelf and say, I got it. You know what I mean?
But like, you can get an AF-15 for 15,000. Doesn't have to be a 4.0 or a 3.5. I helped a buddy of mine get a really nice 1.5 or 1.8 copy through a payment plan, and now he's happy as a picking shit because he never thought he could own that book, but he did, and now he's got his Grail. Like, he's a huge Spidey fan, huge. So the fact that he owns that book, that's what it's about. So if you don't get that feeling from owning that book, then don't buy it no matter what. A big book, the big dollar amount book.
Yeah, I'm sure there's always going to be buyer's remorse when you get a book and like, oh, that I just, but if you really want it, like most of the ones that I find through hunting, I wouldn't get rid of because I made money on them or I got them at a good price, so I don't mind keeping them. The bigger ones, most of them I'm happy to keep. That GSX just hit me the wrong way just because it's whatever.
And again, your taste will always evolve. Like you could love the book when you buy it, and you may change in 2 years, 5 years, 5 months. That's part of the hobby, right? As we evolve, as which we can move on to kind of the next topic here, right? So Laurence kind of got that Silver Age run, and then he had an opportunity for his Batman one, and he traded essentially the lot for the one. So Laurence, kind of take us through the mindset of what that was like for you.
Number one, I saw where the market was going, but I never thought owning a big book like that was ever in the realm of possibility. But then when you think about, like, what is this book worth that I have in my collection? What is this book worth that I have in my collection? And you start to add up the dollars, and you know what? Maybe if I got rid of all these books, I could somehow finagle that into this. And this is a process. This process was going on in my mind for like a year until I finally found a copy that I thought was manageable. Now, I was looking at non-restored copies, and at that time, it's when the Golden Age stuff started to take off just a little bit. And there was I remember being like, there was like a 1.0 that was really, it was a blue label, but it was really beat to shit on Heritage. And I was bidding on it. And it ended up going to like 40 something thousand. And I was like, oh, it's too much for that book that looked like that. I'm like, I just thought it was too much money with tax on top of it. I'm like, I think it's too much. Literally about 4 months later, I ended up finding my copy, which is a CBCS old label. I did not want a purple label CGC book because, one, if you look at a Batman 1 and you throw purple onto that book, it doesn't look right to me. Like, it's a yellow book with, gray and blue Batman, and you have Robin, and the red's on that book. Purple and that cover does not look good. It just does not look right. And to me, you're going to say, who cares? It's a Batman 1. You're right. But my mind is always thinking, for resale value, even though it's CBCS, presentation means a lot, not just for the book itself, but even with cases like CGC. I don't know if you guys ever get a CGC book back and the number is like off skew from the white part of the fucking book. Drives me out of my mind. I have to get the book out of my collection because I can't stand looking at it because it looks terrible. So that was my mindset. But trading the books was easy because it was like, I'm taking something that I've owned for, at that point, it had to be 4 years or so that I've owned these books, and saying, I've had these books for long enough. If I wanted to go ahead and rebuy the books at some point, can I? Yes, they're all Silver Age and Bronze Age keys. They're readily available. For a book that at that time probably had just under 300 copies on the census, there's now a little bit over that. So to me, it made sense. It's like, you know what? This is a once in a lifetime thing. I've had these books long enough. The seller I was dealing with was reputable. So, granted, it was still nerve wracking, but there was a no-brainer. Like, I'm going from books that have like anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 on the census to a book that has 300 copies. And that's what I looked at. And I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm taking a little bit more money out of my pocket, which I hated doing. But I said to myself, after I did that, I sold everything else that I didn't want in my collection. Everything. And I'm talking about the probably a good 50 books after that, whether they're raw, graded, that I had left. I sold everything else off because I wanted to recoup that money. So that was my process, saying, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to commit, get rid of everything that I don't need so I can afford this book. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that. They don't want to get rid of things in their collection.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask. Did you ever think that if I take this collection that I have from, what was it say, 50 books down to one, essentially, right? I know you have like your ASM run things, but let's just say essentially 50 down to one. Did you ever have a thought or a fear in the back of your mind that said, I'm not going to enjoy this collection as much if there's just one versus this selection of books?
I think some people might feel that way. Their claim to fame is having a lot of stuff. I'm not that guy. Like, I want importance. I want history. And I've said this numerous times on my channel and probably on others, is that not only do I want the history to be a part of my life, I want it to be the things that I own to be a part of everybody's history. That's why I own the books that I continue to own, because they're a part of my history growing up as a kid and as an adult. And now as like a father, that's all the books I own are a part of me. and are a part of American history. So everything that wasn't a part of me, I got rid of. That's what was important to me at the end of the day, is that the books that I own are me, that they define me. So I know other people like want to have every book in the world. I didn't want to get into a situation where it'd be hard for me to get rid of stuff. That's number one. But also, you look at all the shit that I have in here, and to me, it's not that much. It may seem like a lot if I've done a room tour, but it's really not. Everything in this room represents me and the things that I loved and I grew up with. And that's to me what's collecting about. I don't need to collect bullshit that doesn't resonate with me. It's about you as a person, what's important, what makes you feel good, and what you can afford.
Yeah. It's funny. Because I was having this conversation with Jason actually the other day, and we were talking about kind of my collection, and he asked me, what's your favorite book that you have right now? And I said, my FF1, without question. And he said, he's like, let me ask you a question. Would you trade all of the books you have to upgrade the FF1? And I said, right now, I wouldn't want to. Again, my collection is small too, right? It's under 20 books. And I was like, I enjoy having these few books more so than I would having the one higher grade of one. Now, but I said, but that could be something I do down the line. Because again, our tastes do evolve, but just I wasn't at that point like you were at right then. Like I wanted to have that set of books that I have. So it's all part of the process.
Exactly. And the one thing I'll say about the books you own is that I've seen your collection, and like I know that you could sell all of those books in a heartbeat if you wanted to. That's another factor that a lot of people don't talk about. There's some guys out there who have massive collections that to get rid of all those books, they're going to have to take a massive hit in value. But if you pawn off 20 books individually, whether on Instagram or on eBay, for the most part, I think you're going to get your money back because they're desirable books.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I look at it.
I also too, like when I think about it, like, again, people, I mean, this is not telling anyone how to collect, how they want to collect. Like, by all means, you do you. Like Laurence said, his whole room represents him, right? One thing, though, I do consider is that we all don't know what can happen in our lives. Anything can happen, and all of a sudden you may need, I mean, I think you have a story of where you sold an AF-15 to help buy a house.
Yep.
Right? And
no, yeah, when I was when I was real young, I sold my AF-15.
Yeah. My point being is just like, you never know when you may need to kind of use them to kind of raise some funds fast. And I always want to think, at least when I buy like go for a big book, is that it's something that I know I can move fast if need be, and I'm not going to take a massive hit. And that kind of also like leads me into my next point. Like, I think one rule, like I think the most important rule in collecting, right, is obviously collect what you love, right? I think that's undeniable. I know a rule that I learned from you, Laurence, and I think this kind of is important here, is if you're going to spend big money, spend it on big books. Like oftentimes, I mean, again, if you have all the money in the world and budget is not an option and things like that, that's you get to play outside the rules. But like too often, I feel like people that do want to do some things or certain things, like they kind of get lost, like, and they'll spend like, oh, I'm collecting this run, but I need to have it all high grade. And they'll spend like a lot of money on like a high grade. In the end, now it's a big run, but it is a high grade. So therefore it's expensive, like key or non-key. And it's just like, yeah. I just like, that's just not how, if this is something you want to do, like, that's just not something I would advise, because again, like you said, to then sell that book that again, isn't a key, even though it's high grade, so therefore it is expensive, is not going to be easy.
We talk about desirability. That's really what it comes down to. What do you like, but also at the same time, what does everyone else like? That always has to be in your thought process, because you need to be able to unload books. God forbid shit hits the fan. That's always has to be in the back of your mind as well. The one other thing I will throw out there is that we talked about fear and the fear of jumping into it. And we talked about, once you buy a book that has some value and that has some dollar amount, there is still fear. Like if you're still have a high anxiety over it still, you should not own that book, because it will take over your life. You can't be afraid to let things go. You can't be afraid to take risk either, as long as they're not insane risks. If you really want something, you just have to be willing to let things go. And a lot of collectors are not. They just keep buying and keep buying. And it's like, oh, I just need to grab this week. I need to grab this week. At the end of the day, if you add all that stuff up, it's probably a ton of money, which you could have one book that's history, that's about comics and self. That's about like a lot of people in this hobby would like to own. There are downsides when we get more into it. I'm going to bring up some negatives of owning some of these big books.
Yeah. So they kind of take us, or go ahead, JP, if you want to ask something there.
I was going to say that in my 9-to-5 job, I've talked to people who got involved in investing in stock in the 90s, lost money, and never got back into it because of the bad experience. So, like you said, as much if you have a bad experience with comics or with anything in general, boat riding, whatever the hell, boating, whatever the hell it's going to be, you're not going to do it again, right? So you got to have that second, try it again, I guess, in a sense. If you lost money with a book, people that bought during COVID are now like underwater, they may not get back in, and they're liquidating stuff. And every day we're lowballing it even further, 20% off,
I would say
the cause out.
You're right. COVID was a big thing for new people who came into this hobby, who got out, who got scared. But let's say you did overspend during COVID, but you still own the books. It's not the end of the world if you're enjoying the books, if they're important to you. Yes, I understand they've gone down in value, but if you still own the books and you still want to continue to own the books for the next 20 years or so, if you're in your mid 40s, I would say, to where you really want to start unloading things when you're in your mid 60s, it doesn't bother you. If you're just happy with the book, I understand they've gone down in value, but I own books that have gone down in value. I still own them because I want to own them. That's the way you have to look at it. If you're going to let it destroy your life, you shouldn't be collecting anything, in my opinion.
It's true. If you're collecting, like I'm a Steeler fan. I've said this 100 times. I have a room full of Steeler stuff. I have no idea what it's worth. I don't give a shit. I find stuff, I put up on the walls, whether it's autographs, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. Like, that's how I think. If you're going to collect something like Spider-Man, then you collect it to have it on the wall or a display. But with these things, there's value to them. And if you get into collecting, autographs, there's value there too. So it just depends on how you want your collection to be. And that's what I'd like. My Steeler room is how I'd like my comic room to be, more of the things that I like. And that's what the hobby's all about. So it wouldn't bother me if they went down in value, because I didn't buy them for value. I didn't buy them as an investment.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, but when you're spending thousands on a book, you have to have some sort of plan on what happens if shit goes bad, right? If you're buying just a new comic for $4, you don't care. You throw it away.
I got to be honest. I didn't have a plan when I bought my first AF-15. I didn't have a plan when I bought the AF-15 that I own now. I just wanted to own the book. And I knew because of the book, that it is an Amazing Fantasy 15, I know I could always sell it no matter what. Even if it had gone down in value, it wasn't going to lose 50% of its value. That's my point. Like, so I knew that. It's an important part of me, so I wanted to own it. So I also think it depends. People who grew up in the Bronze Age of comics, a lot of those books, people don't realize they're incredibly popular, but there's so many copies out there. There's just under 4,000 AF-15s. And as popular as Spider-Man is, you don't think that we could find 4,000 people who wants to own that book? That's the way I look at it. I think 181, there's like just under 18,000 graded copies. And then you have still the raw copies that are out there. So you definitely over 20,000 copies. Yes, Wolverine is an incredibly popular character. Probably could find 20,000 people who want to own it. But because you can go on eBay and find about 200 of them right now, that's a difference. You go on eBay, how many AF-15s are you going to find? Maybe 15, 20?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, AF-15s come up on IG, they sell. Like they sell.
It's so desirable.
Yeah. So I do want to go forward here now. So you climbed the Batman 1 mountain, and then in fact you climbed it again, but then use that to get your Tech 31. So kind of walk us through that real quick.
So I remember telling you guys a story. So I had a partner of mine who we wanted to buy a book together. So we ended up buying another Batman 1 together, just because we thought it was a really good deal. It was a green label, but no restoration. It had tape on the cover, but all in all, it was a nice looking book. And we paid for a non-restored copy. We thought we got it for a pretty good deal. Ended up flipping it for a Detective Comics number 31 because that book was ultra rare. There's like, at the time that I bought it, there were like 97 copies on the census, under 100. I think there's just over 100 on the census. So still an incredibly rare comic. Some would argue the best cover that has ever been done. Me being, growing up with Batman, being a huge fan, I thought it was a better thing for me not to own 2 Batman ones and own a Tech 31 instead. So that was my whole thought process, because I'm getting something that has, I'm flipping the, what's the word that I'm looking for? The scarcity by 2/3, going from 300 to 100 on a desirable, just as a desirable book. So I thought that was beneficial to me.
What does the Tech 31 go for these days? Just curious.
So there was a crazy 5.0 blue label that sold for like 100, it's insane amount of money, like 160,000 or whatever, a blue label. So restored, I always figure about like a half of that, but roughly probably anywhere between 50 to 65,000. But it really depends on who's bidding in the auction.
Yeah, definitely.
For a restored copy.
Because it just doesn't. I mean, you see far more Batman ones in auctions than you do see Tech 31s.
Yeah, that's the question though, is the restored versus, qualified or green label versus purple label. Like, do you just to own the book and get it for a better price point? We interviewed a gentleman who likes the green and purple label just because.
Oh, Alan, you're talking about.
Alan,
he just wants, and Alan also is, though, a volume collector. Like,
very, very volume.
Like, he's a volume collector as well. So I think he's more of just like, let's get him in, on to the next. And so, like, maybe. I do think it's funny that Lawrence's Tech 31 has the same old CBCS label as the Batman one, which is kind of
correct. Funny. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, dude, it wasn't even for sale. I just messaged the guy. I said, listen, are you willing to let this go? Because I have a Batman one that they mirror images of each other. That's one of the reasons I did it as well, to have it, uniformity. But I'll comment on something that JP just said, is that I'm not a restored guy, like, except for Golden Age books, because when you're talking about dollar amounts for non-restored books, for the Golden Age books, the value goes way over anything that I can afford. So to me, it was just about owning the books themselves. Yes, restored books have a stigma to them, but when we're talking about the quantity being what they are, 100 and 300, beggars can't be choosers. I'm just happy to own the books. Yes, they're worth less money, which is fine. They're still worth a ton of money. They're not like $20. You know what I'm saying?
No. They're not. They maybe you say a third of the value earlier, potentially, but like for Golden Age, we talked about having qualified or restored. Which better to have, restored over qualified?
You know what? To each his own. I think when it's Golden Age, it's every man for himself. If you can afford a blue label, get a blue label. If you can afford a restored, get a restored. If you can afford a qualified, get a qualified. There's some books you may only find a qualified, and then maybe there's like a handful of blue labels that are ridiculous. So it's all about what comes to market, what you're willing to pay, what you think it's worth. Do you want to own it in your collection?
I will tell you, I would, if I had to rank, I would rather take a restored copy over a green book that was incomplete. Like, I would rather have the complete copy versus an incomplete copy.
If you get it incomplete, can't you send it back to get it a 0.5?
It depends. So it's weird, because when I got that Batman green label, I actually emailed Matt Nelson over at CGC and I asked him, listen, I have this Batman one. The reason it was green label is he said the cover was married. Okay. The front cover or the back cover, I don't remember. One of them was married. And I asked them, I said, listen, being that the book is complete, can I submit this for a 0.5 blue label? And he said, no. He's like, because whatever part of it was married, it has to be green no matter what. I said, even though I've seen other books where they're blue, and I brought it to his attention, he said, yes. So sometimes I don't understand why certain books get certain grades, and I'll leave it at that.
Right.
But that's not for me to decide. I sent the email, asked him, he said no, and that was it.
Maybe PSA will do something different for you down the road.
I think PSA is just going to be that standard label, and it'll just say restored, just like kind of like how CBCS does it. It'll say restored underneath. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Laurence. So now we kind of really can get into the kind of the meat of this discussion here, right? So you got the Batman one, you got the Tech 31. So now we're at where do you go from here? How do you continue to enjoy the hobby? Like, where does your mind go now?
It's a lot harder. Don't get me wrong, because for however long you're in this hobby, is that you're always hunting for something. You never stop being a collector. And that's the one thing. You're always looking for something, whether you think you should buy it or you shouldn't. I go through that a lot now. Like, I'll see books like, oh man, I maybe that's a pretty good deal. Maybe I should buy that. And then I stop myself. I'm like, you know what? I don't need to spend that money right now. I'm happy with what I have. So I think just being a part of the hobby doesn't mean you have to buy books all the time. I haven't bought a book in a very long time. I bought an ASM 41 recently off a live sale because I got rid of my copy when I traded it for something else. So I re-got that. So now my run is complete again. That's the only reason I bought that book. But it's harder. Don't get me wrong. Once you've gone from here and then you've acquired almost everything you've ever wanted, but I don't know how many people have done that. So people are probably still climbing that mountain. And I hate to use that analogy because it's not a fucking contest. It's really not. It's about what you want, what you can afford, what you're willing to give up. And what you're willing to give up is really the meat of the conversation, because let's say you own like an FF1 like you do. You could probably trade all your books for an AF15, but I don't know if you want to do that. To me, I'd rather own the AF15, but it really depends on what you're happy with. I know you're a big Silver Surfer fan, and that ties into FF1, FF itself. So I understand you may not be willing to do that. For me, AF15 will always be the book that, like, it changed me as a person, Spider-Man. Like, that's my guy. And like I said, I've owned like 4 copies of that book at some point, but like growing up, I read that book really early on reprints and stuff like that. I've seen it like as a kid, I've seen it on somebody's wall. So like, I've always been fascinated with that book, but enjoying the hobby gets harder once you've had every book that you've wanted to own, but not everybody has. So I would say to everybody out there is that don't be afraid to let things go. Try to go for books you don't think are attainable, because I never thought a Batman 1 was attainable. I never thought a Tech 31 was attainable. And then I ended up trading like some books and some cash for another book that I haven't even showed anybody yet. So everybody has to remember, this is a long-term thing. Don't buy a book now and then try to sell it a couple years down the line, because you're going to get burned. The title of this whole episode is Enjoying the Hobby for the Long Term. So buy what you like. We've said that a million times. Don't be afraid to let things go. You can always get them back. There's maybe like 3 books that you can maybe not ever get back. Everything else you can always buy back in a lower grade. That's the thing I mentioned before. I've downgraded books to get money back because maybe I wanted to buy something else. So people can still do that now. If you own a Hulk 181 and a 4.0, you just want to own the book, get a 2.5, take some money out, go buy whatever else you want to buy. If it's just about the book and not about the grade, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, now you're going to sell that 4.0 and it's going to cost you what a 2.5 is going to cost you. So you might as well just keep the 4.0.
Well, no, if you sell a 4.0 now, you can still get money out of it. You're taking a loss. You're realizing that loss. I understand it.
2.5 is what you sell the 4.0 for. It's probably,
going down to the 2.5, you're still going to get money in your hand that is not out of your pocket.
Correct. True. So if it's about the book, the grade shouldn't matter, as long as the appearance of the book is what meets your standards. And I'll leave it at that. Listen, if I own a Hulk 181, I'd want the highest grade possible. I don't need to own a 9.4, but if I had a nice 7.0, I'd be happy. But I always say Bronze Age, I'd rather own higher grades because, there are less higher grades than there are lower grades. So the higher the grades to the bronze, silver, I always say I'll go on anything from like a 1.0 to like a 4.5, depending on the book. I'm happy with. I don't need to own an 8.0 AF15. Like that's not in my cards. I'm happy with a 1.5 even. I've owned a 1.5. I've been totally happy. I'd rather have the money in my pocket and still own the book.
What about, would you buy a restored or qualified, I guess restored would be better, TOS 39?
No, I wouldn't buy any restored Silver Age books, or obviously Bronze Age. Probably less of those available. But
I mean, there's certain Silver Age books that are just so hard to find expensive wise if you just want to own it.
No, because you could still get a TOS 39 and like a 1.0 for like $3,000. And I'd rather get a 1.0 for $3,000 than own a 4.0 restored. To me, yes, I understand the book is maybe looks a little bit nicer, but I'd rather own a blue label. it's also easier to sell. Like I know I
That's
can
what I was
find a
gonna say.
1.0 buyer.
That's what I was gonna say too. Like I have like there's a snobbiness side of me that thinks there are too many blue labels available. I mean, yes, they are expensive, but there are too many of them out there that I don't need to spend that kind of money on a purple for the Silver Age. And then two, yeah, like even if my 1.0 didn't look as good, like I can sell that a lot easier than I can the purple label.
Exactly. So you have to figure that into it as well. And to me, like $3,000 a lot of money, 100% it is.
Look at Alex Comic Corner here joining us.
I know that's a big boy here today. What's going on, Alex? How are you, man? Again, everybody's level of comfort is different. For me, when we're talking golden age, yes, 100%. Get a restored if that's what you can afford, because I just think there's so few available of certain books that it's worth it. Silver Age is a lot more copies out there. You could still find even a 0.5 missing a back cover. I have an ASM 1 that's a 0.5, looks like a 4.0, but it's just missing a back cover, but it is blue label, so I'm okay with that. So again, CGC. I have a 0.5 missing a back cover, but it gets a blue label, but I have a Batman 1 that's maybe because it's married, it gets the green label. I don't agree, but I'm not them.
Well, the other question too is with qualified and restored, do they hold their value as much if you pay whatever market is now for the qualified or restored grade versus the blue label? You know, is it going to hold its value, or are they dropping too? You know, I mean, they're all dropping, but I'm saying, are you going to be able to maintain the same level?
So my Batman 1 has got down from where I purchased it. 100%.
Right, I mean, all comics are down, let's say. So
yeah,
on a scale,
are you saying they depreciate at the same level? I would say value wise, they probably do. I would just think
I don't know.
In the Silver Age, I think it's just harder to move the purple label than it is the blue label.
There's a very big. If you want the book, get a lower grade. If you're going to spend the same amount of money for let's say a 5.0 restored than you will a 1.0 or a 0.5 blue label. I'd rather own the lower grade. As long as just like half the book is not missing and like half the cover's not torn off, I don't care. Like, it's still a complete, untouched Tales of Suspense 39. It's just a lower grade. And I'm okay with low grade. The book's how old? Freaking 50 years old at this point. Yeah. I'm okay with that. Like, that's character to me. Like, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Laurence, I want to ask, so going back to you personally, with the Batman 1, with the Tech 31, with the AF-15, you're a huge Spider-Man guy. You've climbed, you hit your comic goals. Do you find yourself at all thinking like, hey, where can I level up? Like maybe I want to look at some John Romita original art or anything like that. Does your mind ever go that direction?
So if you ever go to original art that's been published, it's insanity. I've told the story a million times. Like the cover, ASM 55, the great Doc Ock. I saw that at New York Comic Con a few years ago. $350,000 for that cover. That's just way out of my league. Like even a page by John Romita, you're looking at minimum 5 figures.
Yeah, I was gonna say minimum. Like,
but if you sell the Batman 1 and the Tech 31, you can get that.
You're right, 100% right. My question is original art as easy to sell as comic books? I'm going to say no, but I'm not the one to answer that question. I do have some original art in my collection, but I wouldn't even know how to move that outside of Heritage. Like or maybe Comic Link. Like I don't even, like, that's not in my wheelhouse. I feel like what I have now, I'm still over leveraged a little bit where I have to get rid of something. So right now I'll share some news and it's not final. Right now, my Batman 1 is pending sale. So we'll see if it goes through. I hope it does, because the collector, we had a great conversation, and he seems like somebody who's really just like me, in the same situation as me, has gone through the steps and never thought he can own one. And now he's got an opportunity, and I'm hoping we can consummate that, but it's pending as of right now. And I hope it goes. So, but like, we talk about collecting for the long term, but you can't over leverage yourself either. I know a couple of guys who we see a lot. They're definitely over leveraged, where they have thousands of books, and I could never do that. Like, I literally have, give me a second, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. I have 8 books, and then my ASM 1 through 301 run. That's it. And like, if I didn't have that run, it would be like 10 books. So it's like, I still feel like I'm over leveraged.
Get rid of the Batman 1 for something else.
Yeah. So I'll give you a story. So if anybody who watches my channel, I have not shared this information unless you are a member of my channel. So like, if you pay a monthly fee, I do some videos every once in a while telling them books that I was looking for, or if in this case, I was able to do a trade and a cash deal for a crazy book at New York Comic Con this year, where somebody flew in a collector and he had a book that I just blew my mind that I could own this book, and we did a deal for it. But again, I'm in this for the history of comics. I'm into it because of what it is. Like, I don't know how to explain this thing sometimes, because as a collector, you think something's unattainable, but then something comes along where like, holy shit, you never even knew that existed. And maybe it is attainable. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So yes, right now I'm over leveraged a little bit in comics. So that's why my Batman one is pending, or else I wouldn't have sold it, because as we talk about, I like to hold on. I was planning on holding on to everything for the long term, but when something comes up, things have to change. So yes, I traded for a book, which maybe I'll show you guys before we leave here today.
You've already showed me, actually, I should say, but
what the hell, man? What am I, chopped liver?
I tell you what, if you guys hang out enough, I will show you what it is before we end this thing today, and we could talk about it a little bit. But I want to get through the rest of whatever you have to want to talk about.
Yeah, no.
One question before we go on. So when you sell the Batman one, that's the only copy you have, correct? Right? Just let me clarify.
Yeah. That's all I got, and I still have the Craig 31. And I was to say that one at some point may go. I'd like to hold on to it, but again, when I have what I'm going to show you later, I don't think it's always necessary to have everything. So that's the thing. Like, that's the thing I think a lot of collectors don't get. Once you have something that's like, wow, I can't believe I own this, none of the other books matter. I hate to be honest with you, that's just how it is. I think maybe, Rohan, you feel a little bit that way with your FF1. Such a huge book that, like, I look at my other books now, do I have to do this? Maybe I would rather have the money.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I totally get that. Like, I mean, I just recently, after I got that FF1, I wanted to get, there's a couple more on my list that I want to get. But it really made me look and think exactly what you said. Like, so I ended up selling every copper and most of my bronze books, because that's just how much that feeling made to me. And then I used that to get my Gym 83, and I'm completely happy with that. So I totally understand that. I do want to talk for a few minutes on what are some ways that you have found of, and we could all think about ways of how to enjoy the hobby when you're not actively acquiring new pieces.
So it's funny you say that, because when you mentioned it before, I meant to bring this up, but I have gotten into some new comic books releases. And I don't really talk about that a lot on my channel, which I started doing like a weekly video about my LCS. They gave me their top 5 books, and I was covering that for a bit. I don't know how longer I'm going to do them, but not a lot of people watch them, but I enjoy doing them. But one, there's a lot, and I also made, when I did a live stream with Swaggle and Manu and all those guys, that I did mention that new books right now are taking over a little bit for the vintage. So there's a lot more news coming out regarding new books as opposed to vintage. So I said for the first half of this year, that's going to be the priority for a lot of collectors, even myself. So I've been collecting a lot of Mark Spear stuff because I absolutely love his artwork.
What is he doing right now?
He's doing the Monsters
okay.
run. Those books are incredibly hot. I'm not buying them because they're hot, and I'm not spending a lot of money on the books. I'm trying to look for deals. My LCS has helped me out, gotten me a few books. So that's a way of staying in the hobby. If you already own some of the books that you want to own and you just want to stay in it, go check out some of the new books that are out there right now, because some of them are actually amazing. I don't collect a lot of them. The Monsters stuff I am collecting because I love his artwork. Also, I've been reading some of the Absolute Batman, the Absolute Superman, not collecting the issues to collect, but just reading it. The Monster stuff I've been collecting because the artwork's phenomenal. But that's a way of staying in. Also, if you collect other things, it helps as well. Like everybody knows, I collect freaking toys. I collect Garbage Pail Kids. I collect video games. Not a lot, but I have a few here and there. Like I have 3 video games. I have 2 sealed toys from the 80s, Thundercats. I have my GPK collection. So that's really, if you have other things that you collect, it kind of helps in that. And obviously being on YouTube, talking about this stuff keeps me in the hobby as well. I will say, I think I'm the most versed in what things are going for right now. I don't think there's anybody better than me that knows what things are selling for. So that's a way of staying in it, talking about it. Like, and a lot of guys, oh, hey there, behind you.
Yeah. And I would say add to that too, like the experience factor of the hobby is a great way. Like, I mean, we've talked to death about our experience going to Terrificon, but like we all now talk about that group. We talk about doing an annual comic trip, and it's like you get to meet up with friends you've made in this hobby, hang out, talk about this stuff, talk about other things. Like that's another way to enjoy the hobby without actively. And so like when I think about like my goals for 2025, one of them is going to Heroes Con now. Like that's something I want to participate in doing, like, you know, once a year, trying to go somewhere to meet up with people and do. Like, I think there's all kinds of ways to that kind of lends to like the community aspect that you were talking about with being on.
Even if you're not traveling and meeting friends, if there's any type of con in your area, I mean, I go to a bunch of cons. Like just next month alone, I'm finally going to start. We have the Elite Con Expo that's going to be coming to Queens. There's King Con, which is my favorite con of the year that's coming up.
Vincent D'Onofrio, go get him.
Yeah. So like, even if you don't buy books, go and hang out. Yeah. Talk about books, talk about what other people are looking for. Because even though you may not be buying anything right now, doesn't mean like other people aren't. And maybe you can give somebody insight. Maybe they can give you insight into something that, hey, I never knew that.
That's another way I've found of like really enjoying is like, I've, you know, been fortunate enough to make a lot of friends like through Instagram. And like, I always tell people like, hey, if you need help finding a book, like, let me know. I'm always searching and just looking at things. Like, I'm happy to help. And I've helped a number of people. You know, I connected you with the collector that got the X-Men 1. Like, we found that X-Men 1 for him. Like, that was fun. Like, doing things like that, I find is a great way to enjoy the hobby as well. So, yeah, I think there are a number of other ways without actually having to buy comic books.
It's funny because I hear a lot of people, especially on YouTube, say that they don't feel inclusive in our community, which I don't understand how that's possible. Like, that means you're not talking to the right people. Because I have met so many people in my area. You are in Seattle, you're in Pittsburgh. Mike is in, I mean, I don't talk to Mike outside of, you know, Terrificon that I met him. But my point is, I never would have met these guys. If Ricky, I talk to once in a while, you know, he's up where he is up there. Like I would have never have met these people if it wasn't for comics. That to me, that's almost better than the books themselves, is because I have a different life now than I did prior to comics. And that's the best part of this. So don't feel like you're not included in things. Go to a show. Even if you have no idea what the fuck you're looking for, ask questions, because there are people who are willing to help you. It's not like not everyone's an asshole.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I'll actually just with Colossus put this up here, and this is something I started doing this year. There's another kind of fun way to kind of add to your collection, add to the hobby experiences. I made a book. And again, you don't need to do it in a book, but like we talk about cons, that books there are super expensive. Like I don't recommend buying books at cons unless you're going into the dollar bins. But what I found was very actually affordable is you could meet some of these artists. They could do a little head sketch, and you're like, I got a Walt Simonson, Dr. Doom sketch, $50. And it's awesome. Like, and I got now a sketch. I have like 12 different, and I'm going to go to more cons this year and do the same thing. Like, it's another fun way to kind of enjoy the hobby.
That's a great, I didn't even think of that. Cause I don't do a lot of that stuff. Like I'm not a line guy. Like I don't want to wait. If I'm at a con all day, I don't want to wait 2 hours in a line. That's just not me. But I would love to sit there and talk to some of these creators. But like, that's the thing. Like you don't need anybody. If there's a con in your area and they have some artists, go wait online. There's plenty of people online that are just willing to talk to you while you're waiting. And then you get to talk to a creator. That's another way of also staying in it. You're right.
I know. I'll tell you, like, in terms of the line waiting, like there are some you absolutely do need to do the line thing if you do want to get to meet them. But I'll tell you, there's a number of big artists that don't have lines at their booths. Like, for example, at Terrificon, I bullshitted with Al Milgram for a long time, and he had no line whatsoever. He ended up drawing an awesome black cat in my book. Like, and Al Milgram just sold the second most expensive piece of original art with his cover for ASM 184 that broke $1 million. Like, there are a number of creators that you don't need to wait in line for. I don't know why people don't go to them, but there are a number. I mean, when I was at Emerald City Comic Con, Chris Claremont had no line. Now, depending on what con you go to, he does have a line, but at Seattle, he didn't have a line. Chatted with him. Like, so
I don't normally sit in line like you, Laurence, but at Terrificon I did because we met Walt Simonson. It was a quick line. So was Claremont. There's more I should have got, but you know, that's kind of that's how I dip my toe into getting the autographs, because I usually don't wait in line for that kind of stuff. But you know, the sketchbook's a pretty cool idea if you can get maybe artists that aren't as, like you said, big lines, but may draw like you're not going to get Mark Bagley, but you might get someone to draw a cool Spider-Man in your sketch, let's say through Al Milgram or something like that. Rubenstein did a great job.
I was going to say, wasn't Bagley at Terrificon?
He was there. He was there. His line wasn't long enough.
Yeah, I mean,
I had already met him. I already met him a few weeks before at SummerCon here in Seattle. No line. I walked straight up to him and he drew a Carnage right in my book.
Yeah. I wanted to go see.
I thought he was expensive.
His was $100 for, and I have an awesome Carnage. I think $100 for a nice sketch is well worth it.
And he's one of the creators, so I mean, that's
Carnage,
the one. Yeah, that's one of them I would want. Like, if I was gonna get somebody, like I would. I loved Eric Larson after McFarlane. I thought his Spider-Man was great. So he was at one of the cons, but it was too much money to meet him. I was like, oh, I am not going to shell out for that. But that would have been a cool one for me.
He was there at Terrificon. He wasn't that expensive, was it?
I don't know. Maybe it was at New York Comic Con.
He did a Savage Dragon remark in my book for free.
Oh wow!
He was really only doing that kind of small remark thing, or he was doing like $400 full page kind of commission kind of thing, which I wasn't going to go that much. But as Klaus said, like Joe Rubenstein, no line. Jim Starlin, no line. Michael Golden, no line. Greg LaRocque, no line. Like there are a number of artists that don't have long line. Now, Jim Lee was also there and you had to buy advance tickets and you still had to wait 2 hours. And so there are artists that you do have to wait if you do want to meet them, but there are so many good ones and also like you go to a cool con, like I met a guy, he's primarily an inker, Joe Prado. He had no line. He drew the sickest Colossus head sketch in my book, and he was great. We chatted it up while he drew it up. Like it's just a lot of fun. I mean, like all of these guys that are there are involved in these books, and you just may not know who they are. Yeah,
you don't have to buy books to be in this hobby. Mm-hmm. Just go and talk about the books. I think a lot of if you're really bored, go look at the comments on some of my YouTube videos and you could see just people like commenting about like how much something reminds them of something else that they grew up with or whatever. That's it about. You don't even have to go to cons. You could just comment on somebody's YouTube video. That's part of being in the hobby as well. So it's stupid little things like that also give me joy and keep me in it, even if I'm not buying books.
Yeah. Yeah. You could absolutely enjoy the hobby through other people. I have found, right? Like, because again, I can't get books every week, right? But there are people and friends that I've made that are getting things, when the whole slew of it. Like, so it's you could absolutely enjoy the hobby, I find, by not getting books yourself, but via other people that you become friends with. Like, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Agreed.
That kind of concludes kind of where I wanted to go with this discussion, Laurence. Did you want to take it any further, like you were saying earlier?
I put out for somebody who doesn't watch my content, maybe watches this video. Go check out on my channel. I've done a couple of videos about, rules that I follow collecting. I think that may help a lot of people. You may not like my rules, but I just think it gives you prevents some of the stuff that maybe the mistakes that I've made and other people have made. So maybe you won't make those mistakes. You still may make some, but maybe those rules help you, along your comic book journey. There's other videos that may help you as well. But again, this whole video is about long-term. This whole video is about, holding on to your stuff and not being afraid to let things go that you've had for a really long time, unless there's some sentimental value to it. If there's not, I have to ask you why you collecting it. But I talked about it before, how like my Batman one is pending. And when you have an opportunity to do something, maybe it's in your best interest to just let the things you have go and jump into it, because what I'm going to go show you is the exact reason why I did. But here you go, JP.
Look at that.
So this is a Detective Comics number 27. We all know what that is. It's the first appearance of Batman, but
I thought
it's incomplete. It's incomplete. And yes, the cover, the first, second, third wraps, and centerfold are all color copies. So like, it's a complete book, but literally like a quarter of the book is reproduction copies. But at the end of the day, it's still a Detective Comics 27. There are still original pages in here. So like, we just saw a 0.5 sell for in Heritage for $350,000. A year before that, just
Action
the cover.
One.
Just the cover. So no, Detective Comics 27.
Well, I was gonna say the Action 1.5 was $400,000.
But then just the cover sold on Comic Link before that, which doesn't get reported to GPA, for $250,000
of Tech 27.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't pay anywhere near that any of that money for this. So like, again, part of history. Never thought could ever own this book. And yes, the cover is a reproduction cover, 100%. It's not. And the cover first, second, third wraps and centerfold are a reproduction. But if you put it back in, it's complete, and that's why it's got the blue label, by the way, not the green label, even though it is missing. So who the hell knows what they're doing over there at CGC?
Wait, did it have an NG on it?
Yes, it is. Okay. Anytime you get a repro cover, it's gonna have an NG.
Yeah,
which is no big deal to me. I don't care. But like again, how many Tech 27s are on the census?
Yeah, I mean, isn't it like less than 50?
I think it's a little bit more than that. I don't want to say it's 67 or something like that.
Okay,
I could be off, but it's under 100, right?
Yeah.
So having an opportunity to get this book, and I traded literally every book I had left that I didn't want to keep and some cash for this. And that's why I was over leveraged and I have to sell the Batman at some point. I can hold on to it for now, but if I can get a decent price on it, sell it to someone who's going to enjoy it, I'm okay with it. Because I was going to say, because why are you in the hobby? That's what I'm going to ask everybody out there. Why are you in the hobby? Just to buy stuff, just to collect stuff, or does it have meaning? When it has meaning, it kind of makes everything better. Even if you're losing money, it will make things better. You can withstand it because it's a part of you. And that's why I do it. And that's, if you're not with that, I'm going to say, why are you buying books? Because I don't think you should be.
And I agree 100% with everything there. I wanted to ask, so real quick, since you've showed it, because of the repo covers, have you ever thought about just cracking it out just to take a scroll through?
Never. That will never happen. No. But you know what? I don't know, man. It's sometimes I feel like I'm living in another world. Cause like when I got to Tech 31, I'm like, oh, I'm done. I'm never going to buy another comic book again. Never going to do anything. And then boom. So, you know, what's funny? The guy that I got this from, when I met him, he pulled out this Action 1 the same way with the NG.
Like with the NG. Okay. Yeah.
And the whole, it was coverless. That was it. Everything else was complete. It was coverless, but he had a repro cover.
Dang.
Yeah, I'm like, how much?
Story about how he got those?
We didn't go that far into it, but he wanted significantly more than this book. So like that was way off the table, but it was just cool to see because he was actually upgrading this tech to another one. So you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen. That's why I say, if you're not married to something, save your money.
Those bigger, I don't know. The bigger shows are where you're going to see some of these bigger books at, but you're not going to get great deals like we mentioned earlier. So you got to be on Heritage or Comic Link to find them, or have this network.
This is a private seller. So like he wasn't set up at the show. He flew in to meet me, to go to Comic-Con to meet me for this. So like, which is great. If I had to buy this on Heritage, there's no way. I think it would have went for more than what I paid for it.
I do think, JP, though, when you're talking about like a book like that, going to the cons, you know, you may not buy it there, but I do think you can potentially make connections that set up like the deal that Laurence was able to do. Again, it just goes back to just like ways to experience and enjoy the hobby, right? There are the ways without, and like that led then to getting the book.
Yeah. So. And that's why I feel like now that I have this, I don't need some of the other stuff that I have. Like I can let the Batman one go. Down the road, if I want, I can let the Tech 31 go because I have such a rare item that's like, I got 100 people can own this book as of right now. So like, and I'm one of them, even though it's fucking quarter of it's missing. I don't care. Like, I don't care. It's like the one exception that like, I don't care. Like if it's missing four wraps, I don't care. I'll never own a higher grade copy. You want to talk about a book that's I can't get a better copy. I can't upgrade. It's never going to happen. So I'm content.
We'll see you all in 2 years when Laurence has a complete copy of Tech 27.
Never going to happen. Not unless I hit the lotto.
Yeah. She was admiring the book.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
No one's even seen this on my channel yet, so you guys are the first lucky ones.
Only 7 people saw it today, so don't worry about it. You're good.
7 people live.
Maybe 5 more tomorrow, and you'll be good. So the secret.
No, so somebody has screenshot it and send it out there in the universe. I can see it happening.
They're gonna put it on their story right now on Instagram.
Colossus probably did that.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you sharing that, Laurence. I mean, that's obviously a huge accomplishment, and congrats to you on that. And
thank you.
No, it's awesome that you showed it, and that's pretty incredible.
I feel honored.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't show this to like glow, but I'm just showing like whoever watches this, like you think something's unattainable, it's really not.
But I mean,
you don't know.
This goes back to our earlier point, though. Like, right, like you can enjoy the hobby via the community. Like, that's part of the fun, right? Is being able to share that you got that book, right? And that's a way to enjoy. Like, there's this concept of like the black hole collectors where they like acquire these things and they're just never seen again, right? It's like that scene in Iron Man 1 when comes down to the garage and Tony Stark's like working on something and they're like, sir, such and such Renaissance painting. He's like, gotta have it, buy it, store it. And it just like goes away. Like
that was Pepper.
Like yeah, Pepper. And it's just like, again, if you're like the billionaire status, like fine, you go do that. But like, to me, like I wouldn't want to enjoy that wouldn't be an enjoyable way to enjoy the hobby. Like the community and being able to share your goal, your accomplishments, like that's how you prolong your enjoyment of this hobby, is being involved, making friends, sharing the experiences, helping others get other books. Like that's how you enjoy the hobby long term, I think.
So the one thing I did want to mention, which I didn't get a chance to mention, was that every time you buy your bigger book, selling a bigger book is a lot harder than selling $1,000 book or a $2,000 book, even a $5,000 book. There are less buyers for it, so you're going to end up holding onto the book for a lot longer, unless you just throw it in an auction and just say, "Hey, get me what you can get for it." Which, unless I absolutely had to do that, I would never do, because I never want to take that to chance. There's always going to be one person out there who's going to see something like you see it and want it. It just may take a while. So when you own a big book, don't expect that you're going to be able to unload it like this, because it doesn't happen. You may hold on to that book for a year, 2 years, 3 years to find the right buyer who's willing to pay what you think it's worth.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you think that because there's so very few of them, there's a line of people. Like, I don't know if you must be probably a Giants fan or Eagles fan.
Jets.
That different story than Jets. I'm just saying there's a line of people that want to be season ticket holders. So when one drops off, another one's right in line. So with a Tech 31, Batman 1, there's got to be a line of people that want that, but are they willing to pay the price, is where the time it takes. But I don't know. I would hope it'd be
79 total.
Very desirable.
36 Universal. That's the number I was thinking about, was the blue label. I think you are right, JP. Like, and I think that's when, like, if you do put it in the heritage lot, like it'll get sold. It may not get as much as you want, or it could get more. Like I think the point was like it's your risk tolerance level there.
Right. You're holding on to it, and it's not going to be liquid fat. It's not going to be very liquid.
Yeah.
I'd always rather sell, to a person than use an auction house. It's just me, only because of the fees and everything that goes along with it. I have sold, I'm fine with selling a comic link that's like just a flat 10% charge, but you just don't know who's going to show up that day at auction. You know what I mean?
Well, not to mention, you could be like, we've seen Heritage have auctions where they have a Tech 27 6.5 and then a Tech 27 4.5, and it's like, son of a bitch. Yeah,
so it's a crapshoot. So to me, if I can't find a private seller and I absolutely needed to sell something, I would go that route. But like I said, if you're willing to hold on to stuff, it just may take a while. You'll move it eventually.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Laurence, real last question. This is unrelated. Are you going to go see Captain America this weekend?
Not this weekend, but I will go see it. I already caught the end credit scene. Is already.
Oh, you did? Did you look it up online?
I didn't look it up. I was just scrolling and it's out there. I'm like, oh shit. Oh. So it's nothing crazy. So, but I will end up seeing it, but it won't be this weekend.
Got it. So next week, for everyone who's watching, JP, myself, and then Ryan, Colossus Collector, is going to join us. We're going to talk about the Captain America movie. We will be obviously going through the spoilers. So unless you've seen it, don't tune in if you've seen it. Don't tune in if you don't want to get spoiled.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Do you want to throw out, your channel name or anything like that? Or, I mean, most people already know where you're at.
Mighty Comics and Collectibles. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube. I am on Twitter, although I rarely post anymore, but you can find me there. I will mention that if you have any questions, concerns, or if I can help in any way, you're always, want to reach out to me via DM on Instagram. Always happy to help fellow collectors in any way I can. So
yeah, and I'll just add to that, right? Like if you are someone that's like wanting to kind of make this dive into these bigger books, like Laurence is a great guy to talk to. I mean, like he's someone I started talking to from the very beginning, has been very helpful in almost every big book acquisition I've made. So he's very open to helping. So, kudos to you for that.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. JP,
Hey,
you want to take us out?
Remember, believe in yourself, and one day you might own a Tech 27.
There you go.
Peace out, everybody.
Later.
Thank you, guys.